Here's a question for you. How do you allocate your time per donor? The reality is, you only have so much time in a day, and you need to be a good steward of that time. So while we value all donors as people, the impact they have is not equal. Some give much more than others, and those donors need a bigger investment of your time and energy. Today's episode is all about how to manage your caseload by tiering your donors and creating appropriate strategies for each giving level. But before we dive in, I want to tell you about a show I think you'll love called Giving Done Right from the Center for Effective Philanthropy and co-hosted by Phil Buchanan and Grace Nicolette. Giving Done Right covers everything you need to know on how to make an impact with your charitable giving. And whether you're giving a few $100s a year, a few thousand, or a few million, each episode, Phil and Grace welcome nonprofit leaders, inspiring donors, and experts to tackle burning questions from donors. Together, they bust some myths that have long plagued donors and nonprofits alike. Talk about what makes for effective giving, draw connections to how giving can truly make a difference, and explore the roles of family, identity, and faith in giving. They keep it real, honest, and personal because giving is personal. Subscribe to Giving Done Right wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome to the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group, featuring Richard Perry and Jeff Schreifels. Twice a month, we bring you the latest and best thinking about major gift fundraising so you can develop authentic relationships with your major donors. Here are your hosts, Richard and Jeff.
Welcome to the podcast today. I'm Jeff Schreifels, and Richard is off today. So I've invited Lisa Robertson, our Director of Client Services, to join me for today's episode. Now, if you're familiar with our work, then you've probably heard or read about the idea of tiering your caseload. It's a core part of our system and structure, what we call the Veritus Way, and we'll be diving deeper into this topic in our conversation today. So to kick things off, Lisa, I'd love for you to give our listeners a brief overview of what tiering actually is and how we use it in our system with our clients.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. Glad to be here today. Well, we typically think about tiering after we qualify. So in major gifts, we don't do this until we've figured out who wants to relate to us and we've qualified them. And then in mid-level, we do it a little bit differently. But for both, it's all about figuring out which donors have the greatest capacity and inclination. In other words, who do you need to spend the most time with, engaging and connecting with to make sure you're getting the most return on investment for the organization? And what that does is it helps you create this focus within your caseload. And then that level of focus and attention that you should give to each donor is sort of dictated by those tiers. And it really helps you on all those things as far as engaging and then making sure you're having a good ROI.
Okay, good. Now, I know that sometimes when we talk about this, we get some pushback from people around this idea, right?
Yeah, we do. And you're totally right about that. And I think when sometimes people hear this, they start feeling like, well, it's unfair to certain donors, or it makes my caseload management more about the money and not about the donor. And it just feels kind of icky, like I'm ignoring like lesser people in a sense. And that's not what we're doing. So I think today what we're trying to do is like debunk those ideas and then talk about some of those things, like where are the root concerns that people have and how can we address those as we talk about tiering a little bit.
Okay. Well, let's get into it.
All right. Well, so great. So Jeff, what does it look like when we have a caseload and it's not tiered? So what are the challenges that arise from that?
A lot of problems.
Yeah.
So first, we see gift officers spend way more time with the people that they like or they're easy to get hold of, rather than the people that they should be focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
So we hear story after story of major gift officers are like, well, I don't like this tiering thing because I'm really developed some good close friendships with these donors. And, I schedule my weekly call or a monthly coffee with this one donor. And then when you get into it, you realize, so you're spending this monthly 2 hour coffee time with a donor
Yeah.
who's giving $1,000, and you're not spending time with
Mhm.
these two other donors that have the capacity and are giving at the $100,000 level, because it's not as easy to get a hold of, and maybe you don't like them as much.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one thing we see them, and so what happens is that those donors in their portfolio that really have that high capacity and propensity get neglected.
Yeah.
And then we see fundraisers that are not focused, and that they end up not using the organization's resources correctly. So what I mean by that is, the organization is essentially handing you over these. Let's say you have your full portfolio of 150 donors, and they're saying, we have this investment we're doing in you, major gift officer,
Mhm.
and you need to be wise with your time and your resources to actually work with these donors in the right way. So with that charge from the organization to the major gift officer, they really have to be careful. Like, where am I spending my time? Where is the highest, in a sense, ROI for my organization?
Mhm.
And if you, as a frontline fundraiser, are spending most of your time with your C-level donors, and you're not really developing relationships with those A and B level people, you're not using your resources of the organization correctly.
Yeah.
And you're a nonprofit. You have to be as
Yeah. Very aware.
right.
Yep. Hmm.
So I want to ask you, what let's talk about, what are the economics around the idea of tiering your caseload?
Right. Well, it goes back to what you just said, right? Is the organization has invested in me as a fundraiser.
Mm-hmm.
So when we look at kind of the math of that, on average, we think that for major gifts, the organization's invested about $1,000 per donor.
Yeah.
But then we need to ensure that people are giving more than that and that we balance the time that we spend, right? So that I'm spending more time with the folks who are giving way more than $1,000 and maybe less time with those who are giving right at or underneath 1,000.
Now let me stop you there.
Yes, sir.
Because I want people to get this.
Yeah.
So when we figure out, well, where do you get this $1,000 per donor?
Yeah.
So when you just an average,
Mhm.
let's look at the salary that we're paying the frontline fundraiser, and the benefits, the travel, all of that stuff, that cost.
Mhm.
If you have a full caseload of 150 donors, it costs around $150,000 to cultivate and steward those donors over the course of 1 year.
Yeah.
Right. So that's where we get the 1,000 per donor idea
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
So it could be a little less, it could be a little more, depending on your organization. But essentially, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And it's just good to be aware of that number, right? Because
Yeah.
it does depend on the organization, what you're paid, what your case field value is, all those things. But yeah, generally that's how we come up with it. And it sounds kind of cold, but we're not cold about it. It's not just about the money. It's sometimes it helps us think, right, in terms of investment and time and money. And I mean, I'm sure you've heard me say, Jeff, that I always think that fundraisers should get an honorary master's in psychology because we're dealing with so much about people's stuff and our own stuff. And so
Yeah.
we have this like uh, kind of this desire, right, to get the win and to not give up on people and then connect relationally. So all these things kind of come together and we don't want to let go.
Right.
And I'll give you a great example. Like I had an MGO and she didn't want to let go of a $750 donor because they gave many years ago and they had capacity. And they were fairly cool in their relationship. They weren't like, sometimes we hear that and they're like, but they love us and they're great. And I really,
Right.
no, this was kind of like cool. Right. And, but she did
Right.
not want to release them because of that whole psychology of, but they're mine. And I think I can do this and all these things. And so finally, what I had to say to break that was to ask her, like, how much are you willing to invest of your organization's money on this
Right.
donor? Because
Exactly.
right now, in a sense, she was losing $250 per year, right? And I'm putting that losing in quotations, but essentially she's investing
Right.
more than she's getting out. And it wasn't that we sort of like get rid of them now. Like it was like, how long can you do this? And she's like, you know what? Okay, I can try this for 3 more months. It just helped change her mental mindset to realize I've got to be investing where it's really going to do the best good and not keep thinking only the best will come of this, and not thinking
Right.
about where to invest in tiering. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Okay, so so we're talking about major gifts now, but
Mm.
let's also then, what's the difference between tiering and major gifts versus the mid-level caseload?
That's a great question. So, with tiering for either one, we always start with kind of the amount the donors have given, their capacity and their inclination, and what we know about them, right? So it's a little bit of an artistic science.
Yeah.
But in mid-level, we really focus on the amount they've given very heavily.
Hmm.
So in major gifts, because there's fewer people, we might know a bit more. So we might see larger gifts, or we might have some good research on them, on what they've given to other organizations, or a longer term relationship. But the key for both major gifts and mid-level is that I can adjust those as we learn more.
Right.
So in mid-level, I may adjust based on giving, right? Because I put them at a tier of like, maybe they're $1,000 and that's the low end of my scale. So I put them at a tier C. We don't connect, but then they give $5,000. Well, all of a sudden now I see that they have more capacity. So I
Right.
might move them to a tier A or B. Why? Because then I can be more intentional about reaching out. They're going to get more personalized attention, that sort of thing. I'm paying more attention to them. And is similar in major gifts, except that, remember, here they're all relationally qualified. So I've already
Right.
connected with them. But for instance, like I may call you, Jeff, right? And you sort of play it cool and you're that same $1,000 donor in major gifts. But then after I spend time with you and I share information with you that you said you were interested in, you call me for more information. You start to
Right.
warm up a bit. Or in subsequent conversations, I hear that you mentioned capacity, maybe your home or your vacation site or your retirement plan, something like that. And so I might move you to tier B because I hear inclination and I'm thinking more about that connection and the specific ask, and I can move you to a higher gift. So it's just a little bit more nuanced in major gifts and more about what we kind of gain and hear and learn than in mid-level. Not that that won't happen in mid-level, it's just more likely to happen in major gifts.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so how does tiering actually help the fundraiser engage with the donors in a better way? I mean,
Well,
what do
yeah.
we, yeah.
Yeah, it's great, right? So it helps because then we're approach right now. If we don't tier, I think I've got to treat every 150 people on a caseload for major gifts or $500 to $700 people on the caseload for mid-level the exact same. And so what happens is I'm doing one to many or one to some.
Right.
But with tiering, I'm thinking more about how best to use my time. So it's no different than you and I, right? When we're going through our day, we schedule our days. And if we don't put what's important first, we may attend to the urgent, but the less important.
Right.
So really, this is kind of the same way most people manage their days, which is we're kind of ensuring that 80% of our efforts go to the 20% who can really make a difference. And then by engaging those folks, we find those few who are next transformational donors or in mid-level who are going to move to major gifts and that sort of thing. Plus, with tiering, I'm
Yeah.
sure I'm not going to miss my lower end donors, right? Like
Right.
you talked about at the top of this, that people just tend to go toward who is nice and easy to connect with and those
Right.
things. But if I don't have my tiers, I'm likely to kind of miss those lower end donors, and they're still important. So I still need to set aside the time to ensure they're communicated with well. And then honestly, what's really great about this is it just feels better as a
Yeah.
fundraiser to know, like, okay, I'm getting this done and everyone's getting my attention. Not the same attention, but
Right.
everyone's getting my attention,
Well,
right?
I want to talk about that first
Yeah.
just a little bit. Like what the attention level and the differences, just give a broad overview of what you would do differently with an A level major gift donor versus a C level.
Yeah. So in major gifts, my A donors are those that are going to give the most, have the most capacity, inclination, given the most in the past, that sort of thing, and want to connect with me more.
Right.
So, a great example, Jeff, is we one time had a major gift officer with a donor, and between the two family members and foundation, probably gave $1 million.
Yeah.
But they literally said, we want to see you one time a year. You can ask all three of us at once, and we want a gala invitation.
Yeah.
I I couldn't in good conscience say make them a tier A. Like they
I
gave a
know.
lot of money, but they don't want a lot of time. And instead, I'd almost rather put a $250,000 donor who wants to connect with me, who has a capacity to become the next $1 million donor as a tier A, because I'm going to be able to talk to them, connect with them in the way they want, give them great offers, that sort of thing. And it's not that we weren't trying to move that $1 million family. It's that they sort of didn't want to engage with us. And so we kept working to try to engage with the individual family members and that sort of thing, but not as much. And then the difference with the C-level donor is they're kind of those folks who we're just not sure about yet. Like I always say that your entire caseload is still in discovery, right? So kind of that example I used earlier. If I talk to Jeff and he's like, seems cool, maybe he's just kind of shy at first, or maybe he's a little bit suspicious of my phone call or my connection, right? And as that develops, then I can learn more. But as a C donor, initially, I would be still reporting back, telling Jeff about his impact, but I'm going to do it in ways that maybe are not quite as personal. So my $400,000 donor that wants me to come to their office, I'm going there in person like they asked me to. And my C-level donor who's been a little bit like, well, yeah, you can reach out. I'm going to try, if they said email, I'm going to try email, but I'm going to ask really good questions and I'm going to really try to develop that relationship. And then in mid-level, the way it differs is my tier donors, I'm going to be very specific. So I'm going to find things in the database if I haven't connected and be like, hey, Jeff, thank you so much. It was great connecting. Maybe I connected. It was great talking last month. And, I have a really nice personal note to Jeff on this year's annual report. But a tier C donor, it might just say, hey, Jeff, I thought you'd enjoy this personal copy of the annual report. So there's almost very little personalization, right? There's a nice personal note, has Jeff's name, but doesn't have stuff out of the database. Whereas tier A is going to be about things I know about Jeff, like thanks for giving since 1975, or do you know you've given $100,000 over your lifetime to this organization, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So we talk about this and it's kind of like that, it feels sort of like, oh, this is about something very cut and dry in a sense. And then we talk about relationships. So Jeff, how do you balance that dual purpose of fundraising, right? So we're always looking at, we want to earn net revenue. We want to tap into people's passions and interests so that we aren't just seeing the donor as a source of cash and we aren't focused on just something other than developing a meaningful relationship.
I think the way to do that is through these three ways: tiering, creating a goal for every donor, and a strategic plan for every donor. So you know exactly what you're doing with every donor in your portfolio. That structure allows you to develop the relationships with the donor because now you have a roadmap on how to do that. And you already know what kind of revenue goals you set out with that donor. So you don't really have to worry about that. All you have to worry about is developing that relationship, finding out what their passions and interests are. And out of that will come the revenue that you desire. It works every time. So having that's why we're so big on structure, is because the structure allows you to develop the meaningful relationship. Without that structure, you're all over the place. You're not really able to spend the quality time that you need with the right donors on your portfolio. So that's really how you balance that. So that's why I love tiering. I love the structure because it really allows the major gift officer to do what they need to do to develop that relationship.
And mid-level, and we see that, right? With our
absolutely.
With our folks who come through VGA and tell us, like, the structure does work to build relationships. So I agree with you, Jeff. I love that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today on this conversation with Lisa. And it's been really informative. And I hope it has inspired you to implement tiering as a part of your caseload management strategy. And if you'd like to learn more about how to tier your caseload, download our free white paper on tiering donors to create focused caseloads. You can find this white paper in the show notes or by heading to our website at veritusgroup.com and going to resources, then white papers. Thank you again. And Lisa, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for the Nothing But Major Gifts podcast from Veritus Group. Richard and Jeff also write an ongoing blog that you can subscribe to for free at veritusgroup.com. Please join us again next time.